Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, January 31st, 2025, the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month, our favorite time, which is the Intelligence Community Roundtable with my dear friends and longtime collaborators, Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson. Ray and Larry, welcome here. Very much appreciated. I have a lot of topics that I want to discuss today, and I thought we would start with something that is close to the three of us because of our public involvements in lauding Edward Snowden. This, of course, came up at the hearing yesterday for the nomination of former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard to be Director of National Intelligence. So before either of you says anything, and I rarely use language like this, but I'm going to show you a tape of one of the biggest horse's asses I've ever seen, Senator Michael Bennet attempting to interrogate Congresswoman Gabard. Chris, cut number 9.
Do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden like leak.
Media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation. As my colleague said, this is not about you. It's about the people that serve the intelligence agencies of the United States. Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the stakes are this high.
Senator, as someone who has
your
served
answer,
in
yes
uniform,
or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
As someone who has worn our uniform in combat, I understand how critical our national security is.
Apparently you don't. Apparently you don't. Let me...
God, you know, I come from a very different discipline, which is the courtroom, where that would never be permitted. But Ray, I'll let you answer that. Is Edward Snowden a traitor or an American hero?
Well, Judge, first, I refuse to use your coarse language in describing.
Did I singe your ears?
As much as he deserves it. It was pretty callous. And I have to say that Tulsi Gabbard was sang-froid, that wouldn't quit, was unpoised, was not unfazed, and answered to the degree she could, and showed this fellow up to be how you described him before.
Right.
Now, not only was the Ed Snowden thing such a major apple of discord here, but Tulsi pointed out very courageously that, what we need to do is 3 steps, basically. We can either not bless illegal activity, that whistleblowers feel a need to expose. And then we need to go through regular channels that are legal. And all things failing, I have a direct line for whistleblowers if they want to get in touch with me, if I'm confirmed. So she went through all that stuff and said, yeah, he did something illegal, but I'm going to repair that. Now, there was another thing that Senator Bennet, however you would describe him, pursued with Tulsi Gabbard. It's going to take one more minute, but I want to cite it. It's in the New York Times today, okay? Last paragraph, here it is. Then Senator Michael Bennet asked the tough question. Quote, on the night of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, February 2022, Ms. Gabbard wrote that the war could have been avoided if the Biden administration and NATO had only acknowledged Russia's, quote, legitimate security concerns, end quote. a legitimate, Russia has legitimate, come on. Now, the height of irony here is that Jens Stoltenberg, on the 7th of September, 2023, said precisely this. And what he said was, quote, Russia's preconditions for not invading was no Ukraine in NATO. We've rejected that. So he went to war, prevent more NATO, end quote. So she was right? Wow, and Trump himself, as you know, has recently said, I can understand why Putin wouldn't want a fully NATO-armed country right on his border in Ukraine. So, I mean, she was right. Bennett was really from hunger on that score. Yeah. So,
Larry, before I jump to you, here she is addressing these very subject matters. Cut number 4.
I want to warn the American people who are watching at home. You may hear lies and smears in this hearing that'll challenge my loyalty to and my love for our country. Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States, accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet. I have no love for Assad or Gaddafi or any dictator. I just hate al-Qaeda. I hate that we have leaders who cozy up to Islamist extremists, minimizing them to so-called rebels. As Jake Sullivan said to Hillary Clinton, quote, al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. Well, Syria is now controlled by an al-Qaeda offshoot, HTS, led by an Islamist jihadist who danced in the streets on 9/11 and who was responsible for the killing of many American service members.
She is terrific, Larry.
Yeah. I just, when Bennett was trying to beat up on her, I just wish she would have said no. Edward Snowden was not a traitor. While Edward Snowden legally violated the non-disclosure agreement that he signed, Edward Snowden had to take action because the U.S. government had already established that it was not willing to listen to whistleblowers. They had already legally gone after the likes of Bill Binney, Ed Loomis, Kirk Wiebe, and others. And Snowden had watched that. So, that's part. I was glad she was able to speak so frankly and candidly on that. She, as far as puppet masters, she did forget Geppetto. Okay, but
all right.
But she's not a Pinocchio.
Switching gears, Larry, to the subject of much research that you have done in the past 24 hours. How did this horrible crash over the Potomac River come about?
The first fault lies with the air traffic controller. They were understaffed. There's supposed to be one air traffic controller working helicopters, one air traffic controller working planes. They had one air traffic controller working both. And anybody out there that's tried to take 2 cell phones, hold them up to the ears, talking to 2 different parties, that can be, how confusing that can be. And that's exactly what happened. This air traffic controller speaking to the helicopter pilot, and it's not even clear that the helicopter pilot heard the instruction, told him to get visual on the inbound American Airlines regional jet. The problem with that is that's not what the controller should have been saying. The air traffic controller should have been saying, descend to 200 feet or ascend to 800, do something, but you're at altitude with this inbound aircraft and you need to move. Didn't do that. But the pilot of the Black Hawk was flying down the river. They're based at Fort Belvoir, which is 15 miles south of National Airport, but apparently had made a trip reportedly up to CIA headquarters. They were exercising what's called a continuity of government, so that in the event that there's like a nuclear threat or some other imminent threat, they evacuate key government officials to a mountain out in West Virginia. So they were doing that, and they were apparently returning back to their base at Fort Belvoir, but were flying in the river. They're supposed to be at 200 feet. The pilot was at 400 feet. That's 200 feet above where he should have been. And he was almost flying head on. Now, he's wearing night vision goggles, and it's not clear why he didn't see that inbound commercial jet, but that pilot shouldn't have been at that altitude. But it's, like I said, it's a combination of errors. The air traffic controller should have done his job or her job, whoever it was, and they didn't. And then this pilot didn't do what he's supposed to do, and as a result, you got 67 dead people.
Ray, is the government going to claim state secrets when it is sued for being the cause of this crash, as it loves to claim? And if so, was there anything secret about this? I mean, it was a so-called continuity in government drill. Is there something about what these three guys were doing in that helicopter and where the helicopter was that the government will claim secrecy over?
I don't see how they can, Judge, but I've been wrong before about such things. No matter whether they're involved in an operation or whatever, they're supposed to obey the rules when they're flying over the Potomac River, for God's sake. So, no, I don't think government can play these games. The liability is what has just been said here by my friend Larry. And we'll just see how it plays out, how Trump is able to, well, depending on how Trump plays this thing, it's going to be either a cause célèbre or they reimburse the families and do the right thing.
Moving on to Israel, I was very aggravated to see what our friends at antiwar.com wrote. Not that they wrote it, I'm glad they exposed it. But Dave DeCamp has a piece in this morning. Israel's Smotrich praises Trump administration after meeting with Witkoff. Now, Witkoff is Stephen Witkoff, the billionaire real estate developer that Trump has appointed as his emissary for all matters Middle Eastern. But God only knows what Mr. Witkoff said to Smotrich. We know that Smotrich is a right-wing fanatic, but Larry, here's what Smotrich said. And I'm quoting Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. I assume it's accurate. President Trump's USA is leading a moral and just line, and we look forward to continued cooperation to advance our common goal, and we will work on them together. What the heck could they have told him? Trump is in favor of continued genocide, of mowing the lawn, of kicking 1.5 million people out of their homeland?
Yeah, short answer, yes. And, if Trump does that, because he said yesterday that he could force Jordan and Egypt to accept the Palestinians. And no, he can't. And he's deluding himself if he believes that he can do that. Trump stands at a crossroads. If he makes the right choice, pushes for genuine peace, and which includes the recognition of the right of the Palestinians to exist, he can bring this 70-year-old war to an end. But it's going to require sacrifices, more sacrifices on the part of the Zionists, but that's life. But if he doesn't do that.
This is a picture of Finance Minister Smotrich, one of the fanatic right.
No, that's Smotrich.
Right. The other fellow without the tie on is Steve Witkoff. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, I was just saying, Smotrich up to this point has, he didn't follow Ben Gavir out of the government. And so he's doing everything he can to try to sort of rehab his image. The problem the Zionists have is that the images, as you've played the clip of David Levy, the former foreign minister, this week on several of the shows, and made it very clear that the visual image of accompanying the release of the female hostages, that they were in good shape. They were not showing any outward signs of trauma. And the fact that the Al-Qassam brigades were out fully armed, dressed in pretty natty uniforms, They weren't
And
ragtag.
carrying Israeli weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, and exercising what's called good muzzle discipline. They weren't waving their guns around like a bunch of amateurs. They had their the guns pointed in safe directions, which means you're not pointing it at people, you're
Right.
pointing it at the ground.
Ray, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Larry.
no, that's fine. I was just say that. So Israel's got some challenges ahead of it.
Ray, does Trump share Biden's contempt for the freedom of the Palestinians?
Can't read his mind, Judge, but up till now, there's been no appreciable difference. The crunch time is coming. Netanyahu's coming to Washington again, okay? Now, the best outcome I could foresee would be for Stephen Witkoff to meet him at the bottom of the stairs as Netanyahu gets off the plane at Dulles Airport and say, oh, okay, the nice talk is over, Mr. Netanyahu. Come into this little room, and this is how it's going to be during your talk with Donald Trump, okay? In other words, Witkoff is the enforcer. Now, that would be good because then Donald Trump would be able to say, well, now look, we're sorry for all your trouble, but we're not going to give you any 2,000-pound bombs anymore unless you abide by the ceasefire that my friend Stephen has negotiated with you. How about that? Warning, don't fool around this time. We're serious. That would be the preferred outcome. Now, there's the Israel lobby. There are all kinds of forces working against that with Donald Trump. So we'll have to see if he's able to face into them this time, because there's a lot at stake, and it'll go down to his, to his benefit or not benefit politically, depending how he handles it.
Larry, back to Trump's forcing Egypt and Jordan to accept 750,000 refugees each. Colonel McGregor, Professor Sachs, Professor Mearsheimer have all said the same thing. Al-Sisi would be deposed in a coup, and the King of Jordan would be deposed in a coup if they ever attempted something like that, no matter what carrot or stick Trump offered.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely right. One of there actually is there's a path open here that could make life difficult for the Palestinians if Trump decided to pursue it. And that is if he cuts a deal with Iran, and if Iran makes the deal. If you go to the Iranians and say, hey, we want guarantees that you're not going to work on a nuclear weapon, and in exchange for that and the recognition of Israel as a nation, we'll lift all sanctions and you're welcome back into the community of nations. Now,
well, that would drive Netanyahu crazy.
Well, yes and no, because then it would eliminate Iran as that enemy that Israel is using to justify its campaign of genocide. But then it would also make it more difficult for, Hezbollah and Hamas would definitely be more on their own in terms of having to figure out how to resupply themselves, etc. So that could be another sort of interesting, bizarre twist to this.
So Colonel McGregor reports that the bad news that Trump is going to give Netanyahu is the United States is going to open up an embassy in Tehran. I think that's a great thing for Trump to do, but that'll probably infuriate Netanyahu. No?
Yeah. Well, Trump has an opportunity to seal himself in history as a peacemaker or as a war maker. That's the crossroads he's at. Right now, we're a week and a half into, almost 2 weeks into his presidency, and it's not clear which road he's going to choose.
Right, but Ray, 2 weeks into his presidency, transitioning to Ukraine, the Joe Biden pipeline is still flowing. Do we know if they are using British Storm Shadows and American ATACMS to attack inside Russia, or did that stop when Biden left office?
I have not heard of any such strikes over the last couple of weeks. And there is total confusion with respect to whether arms continue to flow. The best information that I can garner is that what was promised, what was in the pipeline, continues to flow. There are congressional authorizations for this, and they'll be delivered. New arms weapons, I just don't know about. I think they probably will not flow. And that, of course, means the end of Ukraine. And even Budanov, a very high military intelligence figure, says that, if we don't get more aid and if we don't have any talks, we're good for about 6 more months, and then forget about it here in Ukraine. 6 months. Summer, it's going to be all over if we don't get more arms or if we don't have conducive talks to peace.
Larry, you and I have talked about this on air and off. I think Trump is looking for another Yalta. I think Trump wants a meeting with Putin and Xi and maybe Modi to come to sort of a big picture resolution so that Russia and Europe and South Asia and the United States can live in peace. That's what I think he wants to do. Don't you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that isn't his thinking, but then what he's saying and doing in public, like his threats against BRICS, well, those are threats against Russia, India, and China, among others, and Brazil and South Africa.
And they don't make any sense.
Yeah, so he's not making it easy. But then everything's going right now in Russia's favor. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced yesterday that in November, Ukraine suffered a total of 60,000 casualties, killed and wounded in November, 55,000 in December, 52,000 in January. That is 150,000 in just 3 months. At that, and that is on top compared to they've only recruited an average of 20 to 30,000 people a month. So they're bleeding. They're literally bleeding personnel. On top of it, the Russians have made rapid advances now, taking in places like Toretsk and Chasiv Yar. So Putin's got no incentive to negotiate. Why should he negotiate? He's winning. Trump has no leverage in this. That's what Trump and company are going to have to come to understand if they hope to win and get some sort of negotiated deal. And understand as well that, like the SBU in Ukraine, they've opened an investigation of Budanov, the intel chief, because there was this leak in public that said what Ray did, that it'll be game over by June if they don't get some more assistance. And the other thing that came out yesterday that was noteworthy is all of the independent, and I'm using quotation marks, independent media outlets in Ukraine were all woeing and crying and moaning because U.S. government funding had been cut off. These are tools of the U.S. State Department.
Right.
The money got cut. So all they're getting is nothing but a flood of propaganda put out by the United States using these Ukrainian mouthpieces. Talk about puppets.
Yeah. So the cash has stopped, but the military equipment has not. If the military equipment stops, Ray, how much longer could Ukraine even last? Could they last a couple of weeks?
Well, most people say 2 months or so. I'm no expert in that, but the end is near, and people need to recognize that. There's one other option here. Russia has pretty much won. Trump doesn't know what to do. He's gradually getting briefed on what the real situation is. Is he going to want to go into negotiations with a really, really bad hand? Or is he going to kind of temporize like he has for the last week or so and let the whole thing just fizzle apart and say to the Europeans, look, this is your problem. You're really interested in defending Ukraine. We're out of here. It's up to you. In other words, without any appreciable talks, without anything else except the Russian victory, let the Europeans contend with Russia. Now, if the Europeans think that Russia is really a threat to them, like it's the old Soviet Union, let them deal with that. Right. They should realize that that's not the case. So everybody kind of relax a little, huh? Relax. And I think Trump might end up doing that. That's an outsized guess, but that's one of his options.
Larry, I'll give you the last word on any of these things, from Snowden to Tulsi Gabbard to the crash in the Potomac. to Netanyahu coming next week to this tangled mess that Trump has in his hands in Ukraine?
Well, right now, Trump has a lot of potential power in his hands. Yeah, his administration started off really with on a wide, let's call it a blitzkrieg. The Democrats don't know which way to turn. Trump is doing a lot of things, and in that we get the good, the bad, and the ugly. What I call the bad and the ugly are his threats against the BRICS countries, and his insistence that they're going to try to take over the Panama Canal, because the Panama Canal issue could really become an explosive point with China because of the accusations and allegations that Trump's making. So, but at the same time, I think, as you noted earlier, Trump would like to, he's got the big picture, big deal in mind. And there are some ways that he can actually indirectly tie the hands of Hamas and Hezbollah if they get a deal done with Iran. But this one will not be a multi-part deal done by other countries. It'll be a Donald Trump deal. So that's what he's, I think, after.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the double duty. As always, we'll look forward to seeing you both on Monday morning.
We'll be there.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And Monday morning, of course, will be our usual. Alistair Crook at 8 o'clock, Ray McGovern at 10, Larry Johnson at 11:30, and probably someone else, one or two of your favorites on Monday afternoon. Thank you for watching. It's been a fabulous week for us, even though there was tragedy during the week. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.